And now, Deborah Kobylt live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today with my guest, David Poses, a writer and activist who wrote the book, The Weight of Air, a story of the lies about addiction and the truth about recovery. And this book is pretty much about your life, right, David?
That's correct. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a hard read because I read through it and I thought, oh my gosh, what he's had to deal with. But here you are to talk about it and help the rest of us with this too, right?
Sure. Yep. That's the idea.
Yeah, tell me about The Weight of Air. Why'd you write it? What is it about?
Okay. So I wrote it. I mean, basically, I kept all of this secret from. God, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I had kept everything secret from my family for 20 years. My wife, who I had been with for 18 years at the time, didn't know. And I realized at some point, as the opioid crisis was getting worse and depression rates were skyrocketing, that I was really working against my own objectives, the changes that I wanted to see in the world. I had to say something. So,
well, let's back it up. Let's really back it up. You were a very young kid when you first got addicted to drugs, correct? Why don't you tell us how old were you? What was going on in your life where you turned to drugs?
okay. So, I mean, I had been depressed long before I knew what depression meant. I mean, my mom would say, "Why are you so sad? Don't you want to be happy?" And I didn't know why I was sad or how not to be sad or even how to talk about it. I grew up in the 80s when the DARE program was big. And so
Right.
this cop came to my school. I was in fifth grade. And he went over everything. You can't drive a car if you drink alcohol. Smoking pot makes you stupid. Cocaine makes you angry. And he said heroin was the worst drug. He said it was originally a painkiller and it was so strong that you don't have feelings. And I thought,
Uh,
that sounds perfect. Um,
oh,
so yeah, so I grew up in Westchester County in New York, nice, middle class suburbs. And back then, heroin was about as easy to find as weapons grade plutonium. So and I really, I don't want to say I was actively searching for it in fifth grade, but that was that gave me hope. I mean, that was really the only thing that I thought could help me. And so,
that's incredible. So when did you first start using? That's
um,
amazing.
yeah, 16. I started using it at 16, and by then, my mom had been taking me to weekly sessions with a therapist. And I hid my worst feelings even from the shrink. I was so ashamed of the depression. But by the time I was 16, I had tried every conceivable antidepressant. They either didn't work or else they made really weird things happen.
Yeah.
And so in the back of my mind, I knew what I needed. I had experimented with pot and alcohol, and I couldn't stand the feeling of being intoxicated. And a lot of people think, well, heroin is this very hardcore drug. I mean, I could barely stand. I got drunk once in my life when I was 15. I never drank again. And
Right, because it probably made you stupid instead of sort of making you feel
yeah,
better, taking the pain away, right? I mean, I
I mean,
get it.
I don't know how anybody can drive drunk. Like I could barely stand up. It was awful. And so heroin is an opioid, so it's a category of drugs. So like if you've had Vicodin, Percocet, codeine, any of that stuff, it's just a matter of potency. It's like saying, well, I've had a beer, but I don't know what whiskey feels like. Like, yeah, you do. So at 16, I was able to. I had a friend who, as it turned out, was a heroin addict. I had to beg it. Everything else was readily available. My friends were using, weed and booze like it was an essential activity for garnet, essential garnish for activities. Sorry, and
Okay.
it turned on the lights. I mean, heroin, it made everything okay. It killed my pain. I mean, I was like pretty much resigned to killing myself at that point, and it stopped me from that.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, for anyone who's listening who might say, "Oh, it stopped him from his pain," there's a
yeah, that's
much
not
deeper story behind that, people. So you need to keep listening because, in
right.
fact, it didn't stop his pain; it nearly killed him. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely not an endorsement. I mean,
No.
basically, yeah, it It's a painkiller. So, if you look at the, physical pain analogy, it numbs the pain. It doesn't treat the wound. It doesn't heal you. It simply kills the pain. And so that was what it did. And so I became addicted in the sense that, every definition of the word, my body was physically dependent on it. My mind was. I couldn't stand all of the risk and the lies and, everything that goes with it. So, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. So a couple of weeks before my 19th birthday, what?
I said, whew, a couple of weeks. I mean, you're not even 19 yet, and this is
No.
incredible. Go ahead.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks before my 19th birthday, I decided I had had enough, basically. My mom was going to Florida for a while. So I set myself up for this like kind of no exit cold turkey kick at mom's house. And I gave my best friend my car and my keys and my wallet and my money, I had no way out. And withdrawal got to be so bad that at some point in the middle of it, I don't even remember, I called my father. And it's probably worth mentioning that this best friend also gave me Klonopin before I started kicking, which I had never taken before. So that might have been a factor. So I called my father, and that's basically where the book starts.
Right.
I'm almost 19. He showed up. He took me to a detox at a nearby hospital. I was there for a couple of hours. I left. In the meantime, my mom came home from Florida, and they decided that I needed to go to rehab. So off I went.
What were they telling you at rehab? Did it help you, your first stint in rehab?
That was actually my only stint in rehab, and
Oh.
I certainly take responsibility for all of my decisions. I'm not blaming them for what I did.
No.
It set me back. I want to say about 10 years.
Why? What was it? Go ahead. What was it that you were hearing that just it didn't work for you? What happened at that moment?
Well, the rehab that I went to was like the Harvard of rehabs. It's called Hazelden. I understand that the program is very, very different today. This is 25, 26 years ago. But at the time I got there, they explained that I had a disease, that I was going to end up dead in a ditch on the side of the road in 15 minutes if I didn't do exactly what they said, which involved putting my life and will in God's hands and working the steps of AA. So my mom had cancer twice prior to that, and the idea of a disease didn't make any sense to me because mom didn't ask for cancer. I actively chose to stick needles in my arms. And the idea of God helping, it was just kind of unfathomable to me that God didn't help my mom with her cancer that she didn't ask for, but he's helping junkies, drunks, and crackheads. It seemed crazy. So I voiced that stuff, and they said, no, that's not true. You're in denial. You're rationalizing, all that kind of stuff. And I said depression was the catalyst, and they said depression is an excuse. And so basically everything that we know about opioids and pain, they flipped on its ear. So like, if you had some kind of physical malady and a doctor prescribed opioids, nobody would say, oh, well, clearly the painkillers are causing your pain. And you're not going to feel better until you stop taking them. And the only way you're going to feel better is by asking God. I mean, all of that kind of stuff, it's like for any other medical condition, that would be called quack medicine. It would be unconscionable for doctors to not have medical qualifications and, insist on magical thinking to cure what's wrong with you. So,
well, you were looking for answers, and they weren't really giving you an answer, right?
No,
you were looking. Well, they were, but it wasn't really agreeing with you, right? Which you knew was going on deep inside of you, right?
Yeah, it was totally not applicable. And so the problem was my mom, at this point I'm a parent, so I certainly don't blame her for being scared and doing what she did. And in the context of, I'm her teenage son who's been hiding this for the past few years. So it fits their narrative of, you can't trust him. He's a liar. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You got to get all the alcohol out of your house because he's going to drink hand sanitizer if he gets desperate enough. My mom knew that I couldn't stand alcohol. And I remember her saying, like, you're making a lot of sense, but what if you're wrong? So I get it. But at that point, I thought something is terribly wrong with me. Like I'm the only person in the world who experiences this way. These guys are telling me that I'm crazy. I know that I'm not because this is what I'm experiencing. So I got kicked out of rehab a little bit early.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I made out with this girl. You're not allowed to do that. So they sent me to a halfway house in Florida. And this part of Florida in the 90s was notorious for detoxes would give you drugs so that you would fail a urine test and they could admit you and give you Visa gift cards and stuff like that. So a guy that I had met in Hazelden, Minnesota was there. And a couple of days after I arrived, we were talking about relapse is inevitable. And we didn't want to be junkies, but we didn't know how to live without dope.
Without it, right.
Yeah. So a couple of days in, he got the phone number, a dealer's number from one of the detox places nearby. And we talked about it. And, my mom had just seen me get kicked out of rehab. I couldn't do it. I didn't, we were going to get caught. I had a feeling we were going to get caught. It was going to be a disaster. So Steve and I agreed that we weren't going to do it. And I went to bed feeling really good that night. And then in the morning I woke up and he didn't, he overdosed and died. Yeah.
So he did in fact do it. He just didn't want to tell. My God.
Yeah.
You may have been saved by the fact that he said he wasn't going to do it and that you were just going to go, everybody's going to go to sleep. But
yeah,
that's awful. Go ahead. What?
I mean, I don't think there's any ambiguity about it. I mean, when you have no tolerance, there's no question that I would have died. That was kind of like a scared straight moment. And the idea of sobriety was like, addiction, the medical condition, sobriety is the answer to that. Once you stop using drugs, a couple of days later, the withdrawal symptoms are over, you are sober, that ends your addiction. Compulsive drug use is a mental health disorder. So the idea that sobriety, not taking drugs, is going to cure that, it's crazy. I mean, if you had, hip replacement surgery and you stop taking your painkillers, it's not going to, your pain isn't going to end. Not taking the painkillers ends. So, I didn't understand all of the biology behind it back then or the science, but that was kind of my thought at the time. So it was like, sobriety was really like holding my breath. And that's, part of the title here, the weight of air.
So you were sober for quite a while, right? I mean, tell us about that. Because I know, right? It's a little funny. You have to read the book to hear more about it, but I don't want to give too much away. But tell people about that.
Yeah. So I mean, long story short, I relapsed through my 20s. I would stay sober as long as I could, and it was really, I mean, if you look at it as the mental and physical pain analogy, when my threshold for pain reached its limit, I needed to do something. I mean, I was so desperate, I couldn't focus. So when I built a successful career, I got married. When I was on heroin, I did very well. I got promoted.
And let's just say at that time, you were in private equity, right? And nobody knew, right? You got married, and am I right? Your wife didn't know. Nobody knew anything.
Nobody knew
that, and that's what we call people. You're a functioning addict. People don't know, and
there's so much misinformation out there. I mean, that nobody wakes up at 7 o'clock in the morning and starts guzzling down vodka and dysfunctional. You know that. And yet we're constantly surprised by, I had no idea this person was an opioid addict and that person and so forth. So like, we think that heroin is this hardcore drug. We know tons of people who snuck it by us for so long. We know that you can't function on alcohol at all. So, there's a ton of, the stereotypes and misinformation. It's wrong. And I thought I was the exception. I mean, I'm not. The stereotype is the exception. So, yeah.
How did you get a hold of these drugs, and how were you able to keep it hidden? Did anybody sort of wonder at work? Your wife never sort of looked at you in the eye when you sort of didn't seem quite all there? She didn't, huh?
If I wasn't quite all there, it was because I was sober. I mean, you have to remember, like, again, this is not an endorsement for heroin, but I was terribly depressed. I couldn't find an antidepressant that worked. That's pain. heroin killed the pain. So if I was, off, it was because I was sober. And so what happened was my wife got pregnant, and the longest I had gone without using heroin was like a year, 2 years thereabouts. And so just before Andrea got pregnant, that was kind of the last relapse until Ruby was born. I fell into this depression when she was about 1, and I knew exactly what I needed, but I didn't want. I'm a father, I'm the breadwinner, I'm a husband. I can't do it, and so I was really just kind of like, get through this. And so when Ruby was a little over 2, and I ended up with a prescription for Percocet. It was a legitimate situation. A neurologist prescribed it to me. My entire family knew that it was prescribed. It wasn't a, like sneaky kind of thing. Everybody knew it. And so I knew when, basically I took all of the first, batch of Percocet, and then I called in a refill. And I knew when I was kind of in the territory of, this is going to be a problem if I don't do something about it. And so that was really it. I need to do something. I had known about buprenorphine, which is now, the gold standard by ASAM. It's proven to dramatically reduce overdose fatalities and relapse, whereas the 12-step and any other faith and abstinence model is now proven to dramatically increase the risk of relapse, overdose, and so forth. So I had actually known about buprenorphine before I even tried heroin for the first time. It was under clinical trials in New York. I didn't know that it was a maintenance drug. I thought it was just helps you with withdrawal. So the very same friend who gave me my first hit of heroin explained to me that you really need to get on buprenorphine. At the time, this is long before the opioid crisis. It's 2007. There were 6 doctors licensed. You need a special license to prescribe buprenorphine. I mean, it's practically impossible to get. Well,
what are your thoughts on it? Why don't you tell people, what are your thoughts on that drug?
I mean, it's insane that any physician can prescribe any full opioid agonist, which is morphine, OxyContin, fentanyl, codeine, you name it. Buprenorphine is a partial opioid agonist. So if that sounds like, it's not as bad as these others, that's exactly what it is. It saturates your opiate receptors, just like any other, but the potency is entirely different, and it's a completely different. Basically, it's like a warm blanket on your opiate receptors, tricking them into thinking that you're opiated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anybody can be addicted. I mean, I know that you clearly, this appealed to you at such a young age. You had, or should we say have, depression issues. Do you still have depression issues, or no? Are you working?
Biological condition. Yeah.
Biological, right. But I had surgery a few months back, and it was pretty painful surgery. And a couple of doctors threw every possible opioid at me, and I was terrified to take it, because even Vicodin I had once, and I could tell that I woke up, and I've never been addicted to drugs or alcohol, but I would wake up in the morning and go, I gotta have it. I gotta have it. It's my time now. And so instead of taking them this round, I thought, oh God, I don't want to do that again. I just threw them out, and I just did like extra Tylenols, because even I recognized that it sort of felt kind of good. And I thought, don't do that, because I can't imagine for someone like you who's so prone to the addiction and the depression and everything else. Yeah, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine. It's a very easy fix. And it's so available. It's so available.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, right now, doctors need the special license in order to prescribe buprenorphine. So if every doctor can prescribe, anything, 7% of U.S. physicians are licensed to prescribe buprenorphine. There's a limit to the number of patients they can see. I mean, they, at a time when, you can get these fentanyl analogs that are killing people every day. Overdose is the leading cause of death in America right now for adults under 50. You can get, fentanyl that will kill you in 5 seconds, delivered to your house in under 24 hours, any place in the United States. Good luck finding buprenorphine that fast. You're
wow.
I mean, and that's the problem. I mean, right now this is a national health emergency, and when the antidote is criminalized and stigmatized and restricted, it's got to be easier to get than the drugs that are killing people. I mean, that's not a way. It's not going to work.
And look what it's done to our society, right? You have so many people addicted. They can't function. They're on the streets. That's a whole situation right there. They're not getting any mental health help at all. They're so addicted to drugs that are so easy to get. And then it just multiplies. It's just, what do you see as an answer? Because you've been through it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you still go through it, right? Every day it's a challenge. Am I right?
I don't want to say every day it's a challenge. It's like anything else. I mean, there's good days and there's bad days. I mean, buprenorphine, any kind of opioid is going to be an effective antidepressant for me because it lifts, the basement of my emotional pain threshold. So it works. As far as the solution, I mean, there's one solution. It's very, very obvious to me. A lot of people don't like to hear it, but it's legalization. I mean, the idea of we can't legalize drugs, they're so dangerous. I mean, that's just simply not true. There's nothing that can happen right now that's worse than what's going on. And, we have this double standard with alcohol, where alcohol is the most dangerous, most addictive thing you can put in your body. But we accept
right, but it's legal. So
it's not,
people don't question
it. Yeah, it's not legal because it's safer. It's safer because it's legal. During Prohibition, there were far more deaths of alcohol overdose than there are opioid overdose today. People were, anything organic can be fermented. People were fermenting their wooden furniture. I mean, the medical examiners were overwhelmed by the number of deaths. And so there's something about the potency, unknown potency is the problem. People die of a heroin overdose because you don't know if this bag is 10 times more potent than the next. A bag of heroin is like a pint of alcohol. There's a pint of hard cider is going to be 2-3% alcohol by volume, right? A pint of grain alcohol is 98%. So a pint of grain alcohol is like drinking 33 pints of hard cider. That's lethal.
Well, since we've legalized marijuana here in California, right? Do you think that's been better or not for people? That it's easily accessible. I mean, what do you think?
It's the regulation that's the key.
Right.
Every legal substance is safer than anything on the street because you know what you're getting. You're not going to drink a pint of hard seltzer and then find out later that it was grain alcohol. If that were possible, you would be dead. Like, it's not even a question. That's how it works. So the people that are using heroin or any of these other drugs, it's like we think accidental overdose is like, oh, you made a mistake, you weren't careful. You're measuring with, you don't have the utensils to measure. There's no way to measure the potency. So the idea of, the grain alcohol hard seltzer analogy, that's what's killing people with heroin. If a shot of heroin could be measured the way that a shot of tequila can be measured, it's the exact same situation. And it's not heroin's fault that it can't. It's the drug laws. Again, I'm not saying people should be using drugs. I'm not encouraging drug use. I wouldn't go out and use drugs if they were legal. And I'm sure that, if you wouldn't run out and, load up on meth and start using it, most other people would also. And that's another myth that we have to get past. I mean, alcohol is everywhere. Do you buy beer every time you're at the gas station? I mean, it's like, it doesn't lead to widespread use. We have to save lives.
It's interesting and a very complicated issue that I'm not even prepared to talk about because I have to think about that, right? How do I feel about that? Because you're right. I mean, just saying we have to legalize that, I have to think, wow, what does that mean? What does that entail? Will it still be on the streets available to people? If it's legal, will people still overdose on it? But I get your point. I mean, the more I think about that, I'm understanding where you're going with this.
Alcohol can shut down every organ in your body. Alcohol can kill you in withdrawal. Heroin withdrawal is brutal, but it cannot kill you in withdrawal. So alcohol is more, this is not an opinion. Alcohol is more dangerous and more addictive than any other substance. So it's not really a question of, what do I think about that? It's like, it's the right thing to do. So for me, I've known this for a really long time. The absolute last thing that I wanted 2 years ago was to be running around screaming about things that, people don't like and taking, unpopular positions. I mean, my kids certainly don't need that, either, that kind of attention, but it's the right thing to do. And I know that. So it's like, I don't really have a choice. I mean, change doesn't happen by saying, oh, I know it's the right thing to do, but I'm not going to say anything about it. Like, we have to take a stand.
Talk to me about your wife and how she felt when she found out that you were hiding such a serious addiction. That's a lot.
It is, and it was. My wife couldn't have been more gracious. I mean, I wrote the first draft of the book. Everyone in my life, including Andrea, believed that I had been sober for 23 years at the time.
Wow.
And I mean, if she had reacted any differently, there wouldn't have been a second draft. You know, and I knew that I had things under control, but you know, it felt like an enormous betrayal. I mean, I've been faithful to her in terms of, you know, monogamy, but I felt like, you know, I was out, you know, sleeping with thousands of other women. If, you know, that's how it felt. It felt like a betrayal of that magnitude. And she was just so gracious and compassionate and understanding. I mean, you know, she knew, like everybody else, that, you know, I used heroin from 16 to 19. I went to rehab, you know, all like that.
But she didn't realize you were using all these 20 years and hid it. That's what's incredible to me.
And that happens a lot. I mean, I'm not, you know, unique. I mean, that's
you're not unique, yeah.
I'm not, and that's. I mean, somebody was asking recently, you know, what's the, you know, what makes your book extraordinary or something, and what makes it extraordinary is that it's not extraordinary at all.
But I have to ask you this though.
Yeah.
How can you tell? Let's say you suspect someone might be using, and you might tell someone in the family or a friend and say, you know, sometimes I wonder, how can you approach someone that you think might be using, but they won't go there? What do you suggest people do?
What do you say, or how do you know?
Okay, both. How do you know, right? If you're looking and you suspect, and then how do you handle it?
Okay, so you know, you can smell alcohol on somebody, you can smell cigarettes, you can smell weed. There's no smell of drugs that you're injecting and snorting, right? So there's one surefire way to tell if somebody's on opioids, and that's the size of their pupils. If their pupils are pinned, that doesn't, you know, there are other ways that your pupils can be teeny tiny, but that's, you know, one of the things that opioids do, and that's the only way.
Interesting.
That's the only way you're going to know. The eyes don't lie.
Wow.
So, you know, what can you say? I mean, I think, you know, our conversation before about, you know, people just don't think about how to treat other people. I mean, the stereotype of, like, you know, every addict is a liar and all like that. We're lying because we're ashamed and we're doing something illegal.
That's right.
Not because
that's right.
You know,
right. You're not lying because you're an asshole. You're lying because you're scared. You're ashamed. Exactly. You feel awful that people won't love you or like you or want to be your friend or care about you. I agree with you. There's such a stigma attached to it, then of course you're going to do it more, and you'll feel so awful about yourself, right? I get it. I really get it.
I mean, I had this thought when I fell into that dark hole of depression when I was, you know, after Ruby was before my last relapse. I had this thought that the sick irony of if I killed myself, people would sympathize with, you know, my wife and daughter would get some kind of sympathy. If I used heroin to avoid killing myself, I'm a fucking asshole, and everybody would, you know, hate me. So, I mean, that tells you how bad the stigma and the stereotype is.
Right. So we do need a certain level of compassion to all people who are addicted, whether they're living on the streets or whether they're living in your house, and you may not know.
Right. And I mean, you know, part of the problem is, like, the pendulum really doesn't, you know, it swings on both ends of the extreme. And so the idea that there's something to be, you know, accountability is very important. I mean, if you're going around robbing people to pay for your drugs, like, you know, that's not okay, and that needs to be dealt with. But the idea of, oh, you poor baby, it's not your fault, and all like that, like, you know, there's just some fundamental, like, golden rule shit that seems to be missing. You know, if somebody said, like, stop doing that, you're such an asshole and you're destroying your family, is that going to make you feel good? Is that going to help you? No. You know,
no.
Like, we want you to be okay. What can we do for you? And that was something that, you know, when my parents, when I was 18, they were so, and rightly so, you know, they were outraged, they were upset, they were scared. I totally get it.
Scared. I'm sure they were so scared. They didn't know what to do. They panicked, right?
They didn't know what to do, but nobody ever says, why are you doing this stuff? What are you getting out of it? And I think that's a really important question, because for years, I went, you know, before I started opening up about this, I would go around saying things like, oh, heroin's pure evil and it's terrible, and, you know, whatever. I'm invalidating my own reason for using if I'm saying that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, that's just stupid.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm just rambling.
Well, no, you're not. It's very interesting to get inside your mind and your head about your entire journey, which of course is chronicled in the book. but to hear you talk about it is riveting. It's riveting because there are so many people who I know can relate to this, whether they're users or their friends and family. I know that. So that's why hearing you talk about it is everything. We do need a level of compassion, however. Before I let you go, how are you dealing with the depression that's really probably always there, right? How do you deal with it?
I mean, the buprenorphine and therapy are really the keys. I mean, it elevates my mood, which I definitely need. So, I think like an antidepressant, there's like a base level, depression is managed, but there's like a circumstantial depression of, if something happens out of the ordinary beyond the, kind of fundamental biological, basic level depression, then I have more tools to deal with it now because of the therapy. I'm in therapy once a week. I've been in therapy since I started on buprenorphine, and that's really helpful. So it's really just kind of insulating myself against that kind of thing. Like, if some tragedy happened, it's going to make me depressed. If something, if the stock market crashed and I lost all my money, that would trigger some kind of depression and panic as well. Just for a stupid example, but I'm better equipped to deal with it now, and I have buprenorphine as a buffer. So,
and you have a wonderful wife and family who are there to support you. That's a big thing, right? I mean, how wonderful that she's been there the whole time through, you using, and now through you, always being in, I guess we call it remission. Am I right to call it that, or no? What do we call it?
I mean, I guess that, recovery.
Recovery. Okay.
My kids are unbelievable. I mean, they definitely know more about what's going on in the world in terms of the drugs and the policy and prevention and treatment than most adults, and it's really it's amazing to have to be able to be that open with everybody.
Well, what a gift you've given to them and so many other people out there, because I know now you've dedicated your life to writing about this and to speaking about it. You're a true activist to really help so many people, and as you said, it's the number one accidental overdose is the number one cause of death among adults in the United States. That's huge. I didn't realize that either until I read about it and you told me. So I really appreciate you sharing. Go ahead, please.
Accidental means preventable. I mean, so the leading cause of death is something that we know how to prevent, and we're not preventing. I mean, like, that's really fucking disgusting. Yeah. We're not doing anything about that.
No, but you are. And that's why I'm so glad to have you on our show. Please, I want people to pick up the book, The Weight of Air. Now, when is it available to folks, right? It's not quite out yet.
Yeah, no, July 6th is publication date. Pre-orders are available on Amazon and anywhere else that you could buy a book. Go to your bookstore, tell them to order it, they'll get it for you.
Yeah, I'd love to do a reading with you maybe when it's out. That would be great, because I think you personally are going to help a lot of people. So thank you for writing this. Thank you for talking to us and for talking to all the people out there, the kids, the adults, because this is big, and it's only getting worse. And I think we shouldn't be ashamed, right? There's so many of us who are dealing with this. So please just don't be ashamed. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. You've been David Poses. Anything else you'd like to say to our audience before I let you go?
I think that's basically it. Please.
And like, how can they find you on your social media pages? Like, will you answer people if they go, "Hey, I need help"?
Yeah. Yes, I will answer people. I'm not a doctor, so I can tell you what I think, but that's not a substitute for medical care. I'm davidposes.com. David the Kick on Twitter. All my social media stuff is on my website, contact and all that. So davidposes.com is the best way.
I so enjoyed our talk. I really did. The Weight of Air. Pick it up in July. And in the meantime, look up David, look at his pages, what he has to say, his talks, because there's a lot of value there. You've been through it. You're going through it. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on Deborah Kobylt Live. It's a very important discussion we had. You can find us everywhere: YouTube, IGTV, Facebook, every possible audio platform for podcasts. Put in our name, you'll find us. So thanks again for being here. Thank you again, David, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks.